This is a clip from the latest episode of the Game Football podcast from The Times. To listen to the full show, go to wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get straight into the action, shall we? Plymouth Argyle. We absolutely love it, don't we? Absolutely buzzed. I'll be honest, I was in the office yesterday, still feeling a little groggy, and they lifted my spirits no end. Gregor, this is, just to give listeners who don't follow the Football League a bit of context about Plymouth's season, because this is remarkable, this FA Cup run, when you put it in context of how they've been struggling in the league this season. As I mentioned, they've beaten Brentford, and now Liverpool is quite the achievement, regardless, but is quite the achievement given the season they're having in the Championship.
Yeah, it's been an absolute stinker. I mean, obviously they've changed manager quite recently. Wayne Rooney's time looked like it was going to have some promise. There was spirit, undoubtedly, a lot of late.
There were a couple of highs, a couple of late levellers, couple of
late winners,
big scoring games.
But then it all kind of fell apart, and they just conceded bucket loads of goals. So the fact that they got a clean sheet against the Premier League leaders, although it was clearly a much changed team, still remarkable. And just a great FA Cup tie and moment as well for Plymouth. Plymouth have been a club on the rise as well for quite a long time. They fell as low as League Two. Simon Hallett, their owner, is a kind of local businessman who's made his money in the US and been really smart in the way that he's progressed the club. Rooney was a bit of a kind of a punt, it felt. Brought eyes and attention to a place of the country that's obviously out on its own. Never had a Premier League club, and it didn't work. But it looks like in Miran Muslic, but they've certainly got a really interesting man at the helm. A really engaging, charismatic kind of figure. All his interviews kind of you're very drawn to, and he speaks brilliantly, and clearly he's inspiring the team, because we didn't do the EFL podcast, but I was doing some prep, which is a waste of time. Cheers for that, Tom. And
honestly, 2 minutes in and getting a kick in, and not very well.
They'd drawn with Sunderland and beaten West Brom in the previous two games. They were tanked 5-0 by Burnley when one of his first games. I think maybe there was QPR before that. So it wasn't, it didn't look like much was going to change, but things are starting to shift a bit now. So this isn't, well, clearly it's a huge shock, but they're starting to turn the tide a little bit in the Championship as well. Long way to go for them there, but brilliant day for Plymouth.
I thought this was the perfectly pitched FA Cup shock type performance. As I say, I was watching it in the office. There was lots of other things happening. There was rugby happening, people watching things on the big screens. I was watching this game, just kept quiet, got to half time, and I thought, hang on a minute, they're in this. Don't say anything yet. Don't let anyone in just yet. Got to like 55 minutes. So, by the way, everyone, just in case you want to watch, Plymouth might have a chance here. And then they score, then they're holding on, and by the end of it, everyone's watching Plymouth. I wanted to ask you quickly, Gregor, as well. Lots of defenders celebrating. Are you okay with it at this level?
Well, I mean, if it's Plymouth against Liverpool,
you're allowed. That's allowed.
Yeah, you can forgive them that, undoubtedly.
There were some brilliant defender celebrations.
Yeah, particularly when a guy's got his, knocked out a tooth and stuff. There are some warriors, real warrior style defending and goalkeeping. You have to say as well. Connor Hazard was absolutely brilliant.
Yes, Pete, what did you make of Arne Slot's team? Obviously, they've got a huge game against Everton. The last Merseyside derby at Goodison Park, that rearranged game after the storm cancelled the last one. Obviously, incredibly important to get that win, which was all but secure the Premier League title, you would imagine, going into that game. But he did make a lot of changes. What did you make of those changes?
Is this the bit where I start thumping the table? It's like, unforgivable to do this the FA Cup.
If you want to, go for it. But don't do it. I'm not going to force you.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I don't think it's that. But he's certainly taken it too lightly, I think. And it's one thing to make 10 changes, and I think that's by the by now. I think when you've got the games that they've got, competing on multiple fronts, fine. But it was the bench, wasn't it? It was the bench. You had just Darwin Núñez as a senior player on there, and great for offering younger players opportunities. I'm all for that, but he's taken it far too lightly, and they've come up short. We know what the FA Cup is like, and I think it's easy to go, well, he's taken the tournament too lightly. It's he's come, his first season's gone really well, but he's underestimated that grand old competition. But there is a slight element of that. The cup throws up games like this. We've seen that. We've seen how Manchester City squeaked past Leyton Orient. You're going to find difficult trips like this, and I think not having those options, even from the bench, just to see out the game. We saw what Tottenham did to Tamworth. I mean, a different scale of magnitude between the two teams, but that gets you out of a hole, really.
Yeah.
I agree. It's the bench. It's not the team selection. Some people are banging the drum about that.
The squad selection.
The squad, absolutely. To leave Salah, Van Dijk, McAllister, Kanate, Szoboszlai, Gakpo, Gravenberch at home. That's. I'm not sure he'll do it again.
I'm not sure he'll do it again. I mean, what's the idea there? I mean, surely, I know Plymouth is a long way from Liverpool, but you'd think, I mean, the travelling that they do in the way they do it, you'd probably, is it an extra sort of 5% of fatigue to have those options on the bench? If you're resting someone and they're not playing, them sitting in the stand feels to me like it is slightly more tiring than watching it on your sofa at home. But it's not that much more tiring, is it?
No, I agree. And look, clearly, we're going to speak about Spurs, and Ange just keeps banging on about how tired they are, and there is a clear urge for managers whenever they get the opportunity to give their most important players a complete rest, because their schedule is relentless. So you can understand the logic and the thinking behind it, but Tom's right. Ultimately, to not have even a few of them, particularly the attacking players, available if needed to turn the momentum of the game in the second half.
Which once Plymouth scored was when everyone starts going, hang on, they could do this here, because there's no cavalry coming over the hill.
As I say, I'm not sure he'll do it again. I think we say we know what the FA Cup's like. I've watched it, but it is. I was at Orient and heard Pep waxing lyrical about the competition, and being totally reinvigorated, it felt, by being at Brisbane Road and talking about this is the kind of locker rooms we were born in. We weren't born in Wembley. This is where we he enjoyed all of it, and he realised, and he referenced Mike. He name dropped Mike Flynn, manager, because they played Newport. These games stuck in his memory. Cheltenham as well. He was going. He could tell he really loved it, and the strength and the sort of unique character of the English pyramid is something he absolutely loves and has grown to love while he's been here. Slot's just arrived. Yeah, maybe the same will happen, but I'm not sure he'll underestimate it in the same way again.
I mean, it's why it's so difficult to win. We always have this conversation in kind of March, April, don't we, about trebles and quadruples. But actually, it is. I agree. It is almost impossible.
Rotating
really.
is hard
because you come up against Plymouth away from home in the cup, and you think, well, you can play some of the youngsters, but senior football is different. I think people often assume that the big clubs, they have these kind of fringe players and youngsters who must also be better than the Championship players and the League One players. But the margins are really fine, and if you're not kind of used to playing senior football, you're not used to playing this kind of atmosphere, you often see these kind of highly rotated teams slip up for that reason.
I was going to kind of ask that in the context of how big a shock this was, because again, in the office yesterday, one of the sub-editors put on the match report for this game that it was one of the biggest FA Cup shocks of all time, and a lot of times readers in the comment section being like, nowhere near, no chance, etc., etc. And is that to do with modern football, and about how you talked about fine margins there, Tom, how close the gap is maybe now, that maybe Premier League fans don't quite realise? Gregor, we talk about the Football League and the quality, but if you look at that team that Liverpool picked and think about the Checker Trade Trophy, where they have under 21 teams and stuff like that, and fine, they wouldn't have Luis Diaz and Jota and Chiesa in it and stuff, but it wouldn't be far off. Some of those players would be playing in a Liverpool under 21 team. And I was looking at it and thinking the other way and going, yeah, Liverpool picked still a strong team, don't take anything away from Plymouth, but would you pick that team against Ipswich, against Southampton? Because I don't know how big the gap is between Ipswich and Southampton to Plymouth, even though they're bottom of two different leagues, in comparison to Liverpool to Southampton. Would you go to Southampton in the Premier League and field that team? Probably not.
No.
So but form and momentum are also really important, aren't they? You often see sort of lower half Premier League teams, play against, let's say, a high-flying Championship side and lose, and that does happen because the gap there is not that big. And even if both teams rotate, winning is a habit. And if you've been winning for the last 2 or 3 months and you've been losing like Southampton have, then I think that gap is very easily closable. From Liverpool, the top of the Premier League, to to where Plymouth are, is a long way, in my opinion. And I think this is up there. I mean, I do think that the rotation thing is a big part, right? Maybe 20 years ago, you would have a first choice Liverpool, playing against Plymouth here, and that would be an even bigger shock to see like Salah get beaten by Plymouth. That's a different thing, isn't it? And I think that there's always that asterisk. Every single report now in any kind of FA Cup match always has to put in the sort of second or third par. They made 8 changes from the team. That is always there. It's always that caveat, isn't it? So I think that's why there's always this sense that sometimes these shocks aren't quite as surprising as you think.
But let's not overdo it as well. You did name the front three there.
Absolutely,
they could quite easily start in the Premier League.
I'm saying it's based on the comments to this section of the Times website. Lots of people disagreeing. Some people saying it is a huge shock.
Endo's a player who's like a bit of a cult hero, cult favourite. Sorry. Harvey Elliott is a player who can quite easily be a starter for Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gomez obviously had to go off. So that's the thing. It's kind of at the back, and when you just tip the scales a little bit further into the inexperience, and it's also about the mindset that the players who are asked to play are in. It's like you can be a little bit put out by this if all your kind of fellow first team players are at home with their feet up. The reality is, professional footballers, they love playing football, but there's a little bit of them maybe thinking, how come I'm down here in Plymouth when they're at home?
Yeah.
So if that kind of, if there's one or two players like that, then it can have a big effect.
I'm saying it as much as a compliment to Plymouth, by the way, not to insult or take anything away from them, but to say to your listener who might not know about how good the Football League is, it is a really good standard, and that teams are much better organised now. Every team can give themselves a chance, is what I'm saying. Like even if they were lower down. And we're going to talk about, and let's talk about it now. Birmingham against Newcastle. This was a game you previewed, Gregor, which we decided to preview based on kind of this exact point, that Newcastle are a great team, but we backed Birmingham to give them a good game, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, although this was slightly unique in that it's probably hard to think of a game between a team in the Premier League and League One that kind of 38 places between the two clubs didn't feel like appropriate in terms of even the spending that Birmingham have made in the summer. They spent £25 million on I think 17 players. Their ambition. There was a story in the local news this week that their chairman Tom Wagner threw out an idea of building a subterranean tunnel between Birmingham New Street Station and the new £3 billion sports campus that's going to be home. They want to be home to their new stadium. So like the ambition in this place, we all know about Tom Brady, and the ambition is off the scale. So, and you saw it was like the Super Bowl before kickoff. This is a bit different, but the fact remains there were 38 places between them, and it didn't look like it for a lot of the game. And Newcastle made 9 changes, but they were still a very strong team, and Birmingham took the lead after a minute. Scored an absolute worldie with through Iwata as well. This was a proper cup tie, and even though the changes were there were a lot of still kind of recognisable players that came in for Newcastle. And as you say, it shows that the depth is there. It's like, although this was slightly different, the strength of the Football League, if there's the Premier League team have take a little kind of step down from their absolute grade A team, there's undoubtedly a chance.
Yeah, a great save as well in that game that ended up being a goal. And we needed VAR, didn't we, in that game? Or did we not?
Yeah, well, we don't know whether, that's the thing, we don't know whether there's been a lot of talk about VAR this weekend, hasn't there?
Yeah.
And although this would have been goal line technology, we don't really know whether it was a goal or not, because it was kind of palmed out just kind of the ball was looking like it was just over the line, but we don't know for certain whether it was or wasn't. So that was a bit of controversy in the game. But
yeah, David, a regular listener, got in touch. He often gets in touch around FA Cup time to say how much he enjoys watching the games without VAR. Do you guys notice it when you're in the grounds? The lack of VAR. Yeah,
and like there was another one in the Orient game where this goal that will go down in like folklore, Jamie Donnelly's opener, there was a potential foul in the build-up to it, and I don't think it should have been given as a foul, but crikey, if there was VAR there and they slowed it down and they saw him kind of clatter into Gonzalez, they might have given it, and that goal might not have existed. So any day of the week, VAR can do one for me.
It's a momentum killer as well, isn't it? VAR, it can be, particularly if we're talking about Plymouth being at home, Birmingham were at home, you're using the crowd and you're getting those moments, and if they are regularly interrupted by those few minutes or seconds of debate over decisions, it can hinder a team. Obviously with Birmingham it worked the other way with the goal, but Although that would have been goal line technology anyway.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Even with the Plymouth one, I just love the fact that there was no big long, pause, go to the TV screen for the penalty. It was just great. You knew it was a penalty. Holy shit, Plymouth have got a penalty. Brilliant. No doubts about it. We've talked already a couple of times about Leyton Orient and Manchester City, so let's move on to that game. Gregor, you were there covering it alongside our friend Tony Cascarino. What was it like being in the ground? Because this was another game. Like Plymouth, Leyton Orient have given us a bit of life in the FA Cup this season. And this was one where they took the lead. It's kind of, I thought about it afterwards as a fan of a team in the same league as Leyton Orient, kind of similar sized clubs. And I thought this is the perfect way to lose to Man City. You're at home, you take the lead with an amazing goal, and you get to a good half an hour of being in front against the great Pep Guardiola. And then you lose 2-1. They had to bring on the big boys. You take great pride in it. You don't get smashed, and you have a great day. Did it feel like that in the ground?
I think it did, yeah. I mean, if I was an Orient fan, and I live quite close by, so I'm,
adopted team.
Yeah, I'm an adopted team, yeah. There would be a part of me that's disappointed too.
Really?
Orient's quite a kind of unique club too. I mean, they're in the shadow of big, more vaunted London neighbours. There's always a bit of kind of quite a good sense of humour there. They don't take it. It's not life or death to them per se. So that was undoubtedly the vibe, but crikey, the chance they missed at the end as well. Hape, the centre half, ball to the back stick when the keeper went up again, and the roar when the keeper went up because the goalkeeper scored in an earlier round. He's also had penalty saving heroics. The chance at the end, my God, they could have taken it to extra time, but it was a brilliant game because when they took the lead, it was just like disbelief. There was when you get that kind of that roar from the crowd, it's like a bit more than just like euphoria. It's actually oh my god, yeah. And it was a worldie of a goal as well.
I was just so annoyed it went down as an own goal though.
Yeah.
So annoyed.
It's one of them you're just kind of you're
just give him the bloody goal for God's sake.
Well, it wouldn't have been a goal, would it?
I know.
Just to point that out.
Piss off, Tom.
It
for
wasn't
God's sake.
on its way
I'm
in.
ill. I feel like crap. He scored an absolute screamer against the great Man City and Pep Guardiola. Just let him have it. I know it would have bounced back out and not gone in.
He actually needed Ortega.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't matter. Let's just... Life's hard enough as it is. Just give him the bloody goal, for God's sake. I mean, surely you were cheering him on. You interviewed him before the game alongside Josh Keeley, who Gregor mentioned had his moment of heroics. 2 players on loan from Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, surely you're not cheering him on as well. That's the journalist's dream. I've interviewed the guy who scored the screamer.
It was, yeah. And you do a retweet of your interview, don't you, when everyone's talking about it?
Absolutely, yeah,
exactly. No, I was pleased, and it was an amazing goal. And he's got that in him, Jamie Donnelly. He's been at Spurs since he was under 8s. Started at Colchester, big Spurs fan, and very highly rated at Tottenham. They've thought very highly of him for a long time. He sort of played in various positions at Spurs across the kind of front 3. There's an idea he could be maybe kind of Maddison replacement as well, maybe sort of longer term. Hugely talented, and people have compared him to Kane as well in the way he sort of plays up front but likes to drop into pockets and drift and create. He's a really sort of all-round talented footballer. It didn't surprise me, to be honest, that he was able to produce that in that kind of moment, because he's also got that sort of swagger about him. I really enjoyed speaking to him last week because it was that thing where he just wasn't yet a Premier League footballer. He was just clearly just a 18, 19-year-old kid, whatever he is, who just thinks he's really good, and he is really good, and thinks he should be playing for Spurs, and fair play to him because he showed that. I mean, he was in pre-season and he was being played at left back, I think, by Ange, slightly strangely.
Well, you're basically a number 10 if you're left back.
Yeah. Well, everyone plays in defence for Spurs
there's no
now,
left backs, so discuss this.
And ironically, he probably would have been getting game time, at Spurs this season, obviously. Great moment for him, definitely.
Yeah, and Josh Keeley as well has had a great moment in this competition. What about him? What was he like to speak to? Because you interviewed them both at the same time.
Together, and they're clearly great mates, and they were talking about how they go off and play golf every afternoon. And actually, funnily enough, because I was sort of obviously playing on this thing of just up the road, this sort of old clubhouse that Leyton Orient train at. I mean, I've actually played there football myself. It's like a sort of, if you turned up there with your Sunday League team, the pitch is all right. It's not even a great surf. It's just an old clubhouse with a little sort of, like a little kind of cricket pavilion almost where they're training. This idea that up the road was a big sort of sprawling Spurs training ground, £1 billion ice baths and, beautiful everything. But actually, Jamie and Josh seemingly go back there after games, back to Spurs, and they sneak in with their pass, and they kind of still use the facilities in the canteen, which I think some of the other Orient players
Nick all the free nutrition
too
bars.
Happy about. Yeah.
Extra Lucozades.
Yeah.
Quick.
But Keeley, I mean, yeah, he's had a great season as well.
He was
Particularly in
brilliant
the FA
again in
Cup.
this.
Yeah, I mean, they
Made some great
really
saves.
his distribution is excellent. With his feet, which is obviously the big thing for keepers now. And it's interesting actually. I mean, it's interesting having these two players, because we were talking about Kane, who was, at Orient back in 2011, and I think that was Kane's first loan of his kind of many loans from Spurs, and it was all right. In fact, James Restall, big Orient fan and sports editor here, was sort of saying he was good enough where we sort of thought good player, but not so good. We thought maybe we might even sign him, because he was sort of that middling level where Orient might get him. And Donnelly's done even better than what Kane did, and Keeley as well, has come in, and I think in the FA Cup, obviously, just scoring that goal, the 2 penalty shootouts. Apparently, whenever he gets the ball now, the Orient fans shout shoot, and they want him to go up all the time. He's a great character, it was really fun speaking to them both.
There was some great. Kelman up front is on loan from QPR as well. They've got quite a lot of loans, which kind of makes the spirit that Wellens is clearly engendered even more impressive. They're on a great run as well. I think they'd won like 9 out of 11 games before that, something like that. Kelman, it was a bit of a throwback too. Cass said this in his column, where they just turned them. Like City obviously dominate the ball, and they like to play a high line. They just kept trying to put the ball in behind the fullbacks, and defenders at any level hate running back towards their goal. And Kelman was dogged. He just chased everything down, ran the channels. Another day he might have got a goal, and that kind of created a few chances, and it unsettled City. So it was like, it wasn't like rocket science, but it's something that will unset players at any level, and it worked. And it was just a great game. I mean, great day for Orient as a club as well, because where they've come from the National League, now they're in, they're fighting to make it into the Championship, looking to build a new stadium. Hopefully, they've got big plans, but it's been quite a long journey for them.
It's not all youth though, is it? You've got Darren Pratley coming off the
bench.
Darren
Pratley, I loved it. I couldn't believe it. 40 years old, still flying around in midfield.
40 in April.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you'd want me to point that out.
Oh, would he? Yeah. Sorry, Darren, 40 in April. Yeah, good 2 months yet, still being in your 30s. Fair play. Pete, I wanted to ask about Manchester City. Not necessarily just about this game, but going into the huge game that they've got against Real Madrid to come. We spoke to the other guys more recently about this period that they've gone through, the players that they've signed. Where do you think their season is heading towards as they go into this big Real Madrid game? They made it through in that Bruges game, still in the FA Cup, survived a scare according to Gregor in this game. Does it still feel for you looking at it from the outside like a huge season of transition for City? Yeah,
very much so now. It feels still very unsettled. I think even the nature of this game, of course they've come through and won it. I think that the quality tells in the second half, and being able to bring on those subs, comparison to what Liverpool did in the competition. So I everything feels like they get a little pause, and then there'll be something that reminds you of the level that they are at. Now, obviously, Real Madrid they're doing very well in La Liga, but they've got a huge injury crisis at the moment defensively. Still trying to work out their front four. But it's in these games where you notice really the levels difference in midfield. Even the nature of last month and the extent to which they've invested. You can't make that level of investment so in January, which is always regarded by everyone as being the window where you address problems. And for City to have spent half of the entire amount spent by Premier League clubs tells you exactly where they are at this point. So I think coming into this week, you're still a bit worried for them.
Yeah,
I think.
So you'd be looking at it both as a neutral and as a City fan, thinking, not sure. Real Madrid is quite what we need.
Yeah,
right
I think the games will be close. Of course, they'll be close because City have quality and Real Madrid have their own issues. I mean, they lost to Espanyol, they drew with Atletico, didn't they, over the weekend? I think they lost another right back, Real Madrid. So they're
Vasquez injured. Yeah,
Vasquez is injured. So yeah, they're in real trouble, and I think that will make it a competitive game. But you just feel that just because of how everything feels so uncertain there now, everything feels so unsettled.
Pep even said after the game, was like, team's kind of emotionally unstable, and it was still, you saw that in this game.
Pep's calling his team emotionally unstable, is he?
Yeah. Again, he was box office. I love this Pep. I love Pep that is fighting for his club and his team, and it's such a change. And he was brilliant. He was the way, as I say, the way he spoke about like the vibe of the ground and the smell of the crowd. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but like, he was trying to evoke that this was kind of almost. It was probably quite a relief to come from the relentless nature of the Premier League and the Champions League, sandwiched between a 5-1 hammering by Arsenal and who knows what against Real Madrid. This trip to Orient, and you saw like these players had to show character, and it's just on the new guys. It's been a rough start for them. But Gonzalez came off from this one. Rice was just running the channels and trying to win headers. Like, must have thought, what the hell have I come to here? Kusanov came on in the second half and got the ball smashed off his face to score a goal, which he'll probably take. It's been, Marmoush missed a few chances. It's not been great for them. The new guys.
You
so
just
far.
think of the way they've done it, even with Kusanov when he was thrown in against Chelsea, and you just think that, that kind of decision Pep wouldn't do, and it didn't make sense. Not to go over old ground here, but when you see stuff like that, it's like, how bad is it? When you're feeling like you need to do this to Kusanov, and obviously I followed him a bit at Lens, and he was never going to be ready that quickly to play in a Pep system, get so exposed like that. And then you're coming into Nico Gonzalez went off injured, didn't he? Been thrown straight in. I think it doesn't seem particularly serious, but it feels like when you say transition, we're still on the down before we've bottomed out, really.
Real Madrid think they're favourites, definitely, going into the week. I was listening to like the Spanish radio on Saturday night, and they're obsessed with who's favourites in Spain. It's like every single match they have to declare who is the favourite, And
this is a you, Tom.
Always asking for predictions.
Who does this matter more to?
So do you like? I'm going to take my husky voice off to Spain. Only downside is I can't speak Spanish, but other than that, we'll work out.
But no, I think they're pretty confident. Obviously the players are sort of giving it this thing, City are a great team, they'll always be a good team. They have this term in Spain where they call it the European Clasico, which because I guess they played each other so many times recently. So there is this idea that it's clearly a huge match, but I think they fancy themselves, Madrid. And Pete's right, they've got injuries at the back, Carvajal, Rudiger, Alaba, Militao, and now Vasquez, who's been kind of filling in at right back, also injured seemingly. So they've got their own problems. But I think they, particularly Bernabeu's second leg, isn't it? I think they see themselves as decent shout to get through.
Yeah, we'll be discussing that game on Thursday's show, I'm sure. But before we move on, congratulations again to Plymouth and brilliant from Birmingham and Leyton Orient, teams that are giving us life and hope in the FA Cup this season.